speaker today, Dave Lieber, is an NBC commentator and award-winning investigative Dallas Morning News columnist. Dave's career includes riding a bull in at least one rodeo, interviewing the Imperial Wizard of the Ku Klux Klan, and helping solve a murder. He has a heart for nonprofit organizations, winning the prestigious Will Rogers Humanitarian Award for his work in establishing one of North Texas' largest children's charities. Dave is founder of a consumer rights movement, WatchdogNation.com, which shows Americans how to protect themselves from thugs, thieves, scammers, and corporate skullduggery. He has penned several books to include the insightful The Dog of My Nightmares, a book of stories, and The High Impact Writer, both books of which I bought several years ago. Dave's career almost ended before it began. You see, he walked off the edge of a stage and fell into the orchestra pit. Maybe you saw this little mishap on the TV show, America's Funniest Home Videos. It really happened. In his book, The High Impact Writer, there is a section entitled, Nothing More Important Than Ethics, where Dave writes the following. We all start as unethical writers. We have to develop a strong code of conduct that we pick up from our mentors and learn from personal experiences. Let's give a warm OK Ethics welcome to the Lone Star State's Yankee Cowboy, Dave Lieber.
Thank you. Well, first, I can't believe that I'm actually here. I'm in shock that I'm in a room where people have gathered and paid to discuss ethics. Because where I come from, we don't do that. I come from a place that's probably ethically challenged. The governor was under indictment. The attorney general of the state is under indictment. Yes, I come from a place called Texas. And in Texas, you don't generally see the words business and ethics put together like that as a paying function. So I am in shock for being here. And if you cannot tell, I'm not a native Texan. Because I don't think a native Texan would ever say that. And I think there's a couple of native Texans in here right now that are probably ticked off at me. But when I moved to Texas in the summer of '93, and don't ever move to Texas in the summer of any year, the Texans, they started asking me a bunch of questions, and I didn't really understand that that's in the DNA of a Texan to ask a lot of questions so they can connect with people. And the first question they'd ask me, it should be on the license plate, because I think it's the state motto, they don't know it. They would just go, boy, where are you from? And when I would tell the Texans where I was from, they would quote back a picante sauce commercial from TV. Do you know that commercial? America, New York City. And do you remember the next line? Get a rope. And I didn't know what the Texans meant by that, because I didn't even know what picante sauce was. I came from a place called Manhattan, and I grew up on Broadway and 78th Street, so that's about 2 or 3 miles north of Times Square, and that's where I grew up, and that's opposite of Texas. And I was hired to be a columnist at the newspaper in Fort Worth. They don't say Fort Worth, they say Fort Worth. And the Texan would then, want to connect with me, because that's what Texans do. So they would ask me a second question. And this one I got asked every day, all the time. And I never got asked this in any of the 10 states that I lived in before I moved to Texas. They say, okay, Yankee boy, what church do you go to? And I would tell the Texan that I don't go to any church. And they would get all upset. And they'd say, why not, Yankee boy? Don't you believe in the Lord? And I'd say, no, I do believe in the Lord. Well, then why don't you go to church? And I'd give the absolute wrong answer you could give in Fort Worth in 1993. I'd say, because I'm Jewish. And I don't think Pastor prepared them for that, And they would kind of fall back a little bit and collect themselves. But then being a Texan, they would want to connect. So they'd go, oh, okay. I knew a Jewish boy in the Army 20 years ago. Oh, do you know Lieutenant Harry Cohen? And I say, no, it's a big tribe, And then they'd ask me if I was married, and I would tell them I was divorced. So now I'm 0 for 3. And then they would give me one more chance. They'd say, well, do you have children? Because we could talk about our kids. And I'd say no, and they'd give up on me. They'd say, Yankee boy, see you later, you're a loser. And I couldn't make any friends when I got to Texas because I couldn't answer those 4 basic questions correctly. What church I went to, where I was from, what my wife did, and what about my kids. And it was awful because I had to write 3 columns a week in the newspaper. And I didn't know anybody. I'd never been there before. I didn't know what made them laugh or cry. And my first week I wrote a column. I'm really embarrassed to even tell you about it, but I wrote a column saying that I was new in town and was learning so much, and I was learning this 3-word expression which I'd never heard of. And it's really interesting. And I wrote a whole article about chicken fried steak. Now, I'm sure everybody here has heard of chicken fried steak, but back in Manhattan, they don't really have it at the delicatessen. And this guy called up the newspaper to complain about me. It was my first story. And his name was Billy Bob Joe Earl Smith. And he called and he said, Mr. Lieber, I've been reading the newspaper for 46 years, and that right there is the worst piece of writing I've ever seen. Boy, where are you from? What church do you go to? He was so angry at the answers that his beloved newspaper had hired this foreigner, this outsider, that he launched a campaign to get rid of me. I'd only been there about a month and already they were after me. And I didn't really mind because I knew that they were right, because I really felt like I shouldn't be there because I didn't know anything. And I figured out right away there was a culture gap, giant, because the people that I was covering, they were mostly conservative, they were Baptist, they were married, they were Republican, they were native Texans, and none of them went to the newspaper and said, what we need here to challenge the way we look at life, we need a liberal, divorced, Democratic, New York City Jew. And I wish I could tell you that I fit in, but the truth was, it took a long, long time to figure out what was going on because I didn't understand the language. I mean, I went to a Tex-Mex restaurant and I didn't know what tortillas were, or enchiladas, or fajitas, or I knew what a Texas-sized margarita was, so. And when I got my first fajita, I didn't know what to do with the pancake and the guacamole. And the language barrier was something I had to overcome because everybody in Fort Worth always said they were fixin', but no one did any fixin'. And I didn't know that y'all could be singular when used with the plural of y'all, which is what? All y'all. And that is the best word. All y'all. Don't you love all y'all? It rhymes, it goes backwards and forwards. And then I got to the back of this book that was a Texas dictionary, and it said that the one expression that everyone would say to me when they would ask me where I was from and what church I went to, they would always say this expression to me. They'd say, bless your heart. And the book said that's not really what they were doing, you know. I bought a cowboy costume. Don't ever go to Cavender's and ask for a cowboy costume. The boots came in like a boot purse. And the hat came in a black cowboy hat cake box. And the shirt had snaps and the blue jeans, you know, were tight. And, you know, when you actually put it on for the first time and you look in the mirror, you're looking at the Jewish Jesse James. You know? And I got out of this because I did something really different. I acted in a different way. Because if you ever have a problem in life, you have to solve it in a different way. And everything I was trying wasn't working. So I did what Texans do. I noticed that Texans were doing this one thing, and they were doing it everywhere. They weren't doing it in Manhattan, but they were doing it here. They did it here today. The Texans would get in trouble for it. The U.S. Supreme Court told them to stop doing it at high school football games. You know what I'm talking about? Prayer. I decided to pray, and I knew what to pray for. I decided to pray for a date, because nobody would fix up me with their relative or their neighbor. And everything. Hey, I know a Jewish guy from New York. You want to go out with him? And they go, nah, it's okay. I'll stick with the local Baptist guy, you know. I prayed for a good Texas woman, and you know what happens when you pray, even in Texas? I mean, the Texas Rangers last year, they went from last place to first place in the baseball. It doesn't work all the time because Jerry Jones is still the general manager. You know. But I prayed, and I ended up getting introduced to this amazing woman, Karen, who came with these 2 kids and this dog. And this dog was this dog of my nightmares. This dog absolutely hated me. The dog hated men. This is what the dog looked like. Her name was Sadie. And every time I would talk to her, she would just go, she just didn't like me because she was a native Texan. I'll put you up there. So what I ended up doing was falling in love with this wonderful woman, Karen, and these two kids, the boy and the girl, and this dog. And on my Sunday column, 22 years ago this week, I started off by saying, here in Texas, I've met the woman of my dreams. Unfortunately, she lives with the dog of my nightmares. And then the last line was, now I see there's more to my life than you, me, the girl, the boy, and just this doggone little dog. I want to make it permanent. I want to stay forever. And I ended the story by saying, Karen, will you marry me? And I read her the column that morning when it came out, and all the readers read it, and it surprised them because this Yankee jerk actually was relatable. He had a dog that didn't like him, and he was maybe getting married, and it just turned people's opinions around about me. And we did get married, and Karen's here today. So it's a happy 22nd anniversary of the marriage proposal column. So then I got to stay. And then I got accepted, and I got to work, and I got to live the next 20 years as a columnist in Texas and deal with the ethically challenged people there. And that's what I deal with all the time. I write a column called The Watchdog, and it comes out twice a week in the Dallas Morning News, and I've been doing it for over 10 years. And, like I said, when I started, I've never seen anything like this in my life. I want to take out my camera now, my iPhone, and do a panoramic view of the ethically okay people in Oklahoma, because it's amazing. And I love your name, OK Ethics, because you hear Oklahoma ethics, but I hear ethics okay. Ethics okay. And I'm not going to talk to you today about the company, about being ethical as business people, because I'm going to assume that you all do this for a living. You come here almost every month and you talk about ethics and you take it back to your company. So I'm not going to talk to you about the ethics of your company, because I'm going to assume that you all are behaving in strong ethical ways. The only point I want to make to you as somebody who gets 100 or 200 letters a week from readers and has for the past 10 or 12 years, thousands and thousands of letters from people every single year about complaints that they have with businesses and government, but mostly businesses, is that in our world today, if you behave yourself in a B+ manner or higher, you're going to be a superstar because everybody else is so bad at it. So all you have to do is just go above and beyond whatever it is you're doing, and people will talk about you. And that really is not a good thing. That's a sad thing, because that just shows how the bar is so low that anyone can cross over it. Do you know what I mean when I say that? Because in your industries, you're probably dealing with companies that are your competitors who may not be as ethical as you. And that's an opportunity for you to shine and show. And you have to brag about it. You have to tell the world, we did this, and we're proud of it because this is who we are. And you do that on social media. The kind of things that make you feel good, you tell people about it. And if you don't tell them, nobody else is going to tell them. That's really all I want to say about your companies, because now I'd like to talk to you as individuals, as moms, as dads, as aunts, as uncles, as grandparents, as people who buy stuff, as people who hire people to come work for you, maybe in the business or maybe at home. Maybe you hired a roofer, or maybe you hired a plumber, or maybe you hired a phone company or a cable company or a bank, or any number of the businesses that I get complaints about. When I first started this job about 10, 11 years ago, this watchdog thing, I was overwhelmed with complaints from readers. And there's no training that you can have, unless you're God, that can say, here's how to solve all the problems that everybody's coming to me. I couldn't believe the level of problems everybody had. To write to a newspaper columnist, you really have to have a problem that you can't solve, because you're writing to a strange man in the newspaper and you're sending him your personal information, like you might be sending him your tax return or your bank statement or any number of personal privacy things that people send me because they want me to untangle the mess that they're in. And at the same time that this was going on, around 2005, I think kind of our world was starting to fall apart, because the recession was on the horizon, and people were making bad deals that were going to come back to haunt them. And everybody that I was tangling with as an individual away from the newspaper as a consumer was messing me over. I mean, the plumber had to come over 3 times. The phone company was overcharging me because I didn't know that I was able to get a corporate discount. Nobody told me. The bank was overcharging me on overdrafts and fees, and I was trying to get a handle on that. But the main problem that I had, besides the electric company, which I don't even want to get into, was with the roofers. We have this thing here in Texas, and you have it here too, and I never really knew it before, but it's known as Mr. Hail. And Mr. Hail costs you cars and houses and God knows what else. And so the first time I ever really had a severe hailstorm in my house, I went and I had to hire a roofer. And I was scared because I got all these letters from people telling me that the roofers were not that good at people, and I didn't know how to hire a roofer. I mean, I knew in the newspaper I'd write an article on how to hire a roofer, but that was like intellectually, I didn't know emotionally what the process was like. So I decided to just watch my neighbors and see how they hired a roofer. And they all liked this one roofer from a company called Signature Roofing, and I invited Signature to come out, and they gave me a bid, and without doing all the things that I know you're supposed to do to check on someone like that, I just signed the contract, and they told me they'd be over in a week or two. And I told my wife, she was happy to know that I'd finally done it. And we lived in a neighborhood then that had a street right behind us that had the exact same addresses on the block as mine. So I lived at 7712 Marble Canyon Drive, but right behind me was 7712 Marble Canyon Court. And the day the roofer was supposed to come to my house, he never showed. But that night, my neighbor from around the corner knocked on my door and said, "Were you expecting a roof today?" And I said, "Yeah, but they didn't show." And he goes, "Oh, they showed." And he walked me around the side and he pointed to his roof and he said, "That is your roof on my house." And I said, "Are you kidding me? You got a free roof. They messed up the address?" He goes, "Yeah, it was terrible because my daughter was home alone and the guy climbed up on the roof and they started ripping the roof down. And she called me up, at work and said, Dad, the roofers are up here and you didn't tell me that." And she goes, "No, honey, they're not coming to our house. It must be the neighbors." And she goes, "No, Dad, you got to come over." And he said, "I came over and sure enough, they had ripped my roof down." And I said, "You guys got the wrong house. You should be over there, not here." And he said, the guy looked down and said, "Sir, no hablo inglés." And he says he called the number on the car, the 1-800 number for the company, and he couldn't get the roofer on the phone. He finally got the roofer hours later, and the guy started jerking him around and said, "Hey, I'm sorry, it's never happened before in 30 years. I hope you guys will put in a claim," the roofer said, "so I can get paid." I said to my neighbor, "You can't put in a claim, you can't get paid, that's not going to work." He said, "Well, what am I going to do?" I said, "Forget about it, just let it go away." He said, "Why?" And I said, "Because there's nothing the guy can do to you. All he can do is sue you, but he won't." And my neighbor said, "Why?" And I said, "Because he's afraid that if he sues you, everybody will find out that he did it and he'll be embarrassed." And my neighbor said, "How do you know that?" And I said, "Because I'm the watchdog." And my neighbor said, "What's that?" So I called the roofer on the phone and we got into a thing. And he eventually dropped the contract and said I was free to go elsewhere because I told him that if he didn't, I was going to put flyers all over the neighborhood telling everybody that he couldn't read a map, So he just said, "Guys like you make me sick." So I hung up the phone and I mean the heavens parted and a light shined on me and I walked towards it. And I said, "I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to vet the roofer. I'm supposed to check the BBB. I'm supposed to see if they pull contracts. I'm supposed to look and see what their recommendations are. I look at references. I go through the whole vetting process. I know I'm supposed to do that." And then I looked down and I had all this pile of mail from all these readers that I hadn't gotten to yet. And I got distracted and I did something that I know none of you have ever done. I punted. And I just didn't do any of that stuff. I called my insurance agent and I said, "Do you know a good roofer?" And he said, "Yes. I recommend Tatum Roofing of Arlington, Texas." And I hired Tatum Roofing, just like he said. And making a long story short, Mr. Tatum ended up in prison for theft. And he filed bankruptcy. And at his bankrupt hearing, and I'm so embarrassed now because I'm the watchdog and I hired this moron. At the bankruptcy hearing, the judge said, "How come you don't have a bank account? How do you cash your checks?" And he said, "Well, I take it to a gas station and they cash it for me behind the counter." And I'm like, "Oh man, if anybody recognizes me here." So I really messed up, and I looked in the mirror and it's that Michael Jackson song, "Man in the Mirror." I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. And I decided that I needed to come up with a way to protect myself so that nothing bad ever happened to me again with the phone company, the bank, the roofer, or anybody. And I figured if I could come up with this system that would work for me, then I could share it with the world. And then maybe everybody would stop sending me letters. And believe it or not, it worked. It works. I unveiled it in 2008. I call it something. It's a virtual world. I call it Watchdog Nation, which basically shows you how to be a super consumer in your life, at work and at home. And the beautiful thing about this Watchdog Nation is the entire thing is free, and it takes just a few seconds to do. And once people understand how it works, they really never have a problem again. Ta-da! The reason why I do this, and I've talked to thousands and thousands of people in the past 8 years since I unveiled it and taught it, mostly seniors, but the reason why I do it is because just like you, I was brought up to believe that the world was a good place. I mean, we shouldn't even be having a group called OK Ethics or the Watchdog column, because we should be living in a world that follows the four-way test of the Rotary. You know, is it fair to all concerned? Am I being, you know, I can't do the four-way test because I'm not a Rotarian, but I at least know one. and you know, you all are old enough to remember, most of you are old enough to remember when you would go to the bank and they would actually call you on the phone to tell you that your check was about to bounce. And they'd say, Dave, come over to the bank before we close at 3. Banks closed at 3 back then. Because we're going to, you know, we don't want you to have to pay a fee, and give us some money. And I would show up at the bank. This is just when I was starting out in my 20s. And they would like be really nice, and they'd show me that I messed up the float on my check. And then they'd bring out a toaster. And they'd say, we noticed that you don't have a savings account, but if you open a savings account, we will give you a toaster. And the kids here, you know, like, you don't know this, but banks used to court your business. They'd give you stuff. One day a lady said to me, a bank gave me an electric carving knife set. I said, good for you. They're never going to give you that again. And she said, why? And I said, because they're afraid you're going to use it on them. Because banks today, you know, we don't really need to dwell on this, but a lot of the big banks, you know, the super banks that I call them, you know, they just kill you with the fees. And when you call up on the phone line, you know, they give, it was a few years ago, $30 billion in fees against their own customers. When you call them on the phone, you can't even get them. It's like you got to go through all the prompts, and you got to wait on hold. You got to listen to really bad music, and then when you finally get on the phone with a guy, you know, they don't say, "How can I help you make your day at Bank of USA happy in every way?" They say, "What is your name? What is your account number? What is your secret code? What is your mother's maiden name? What is your password? What was the date and amount of last deposit? How many tattoos do you have on your butt?" And then, you know, what you should tell them is, listen, you son of a gun, you took $90 out of my account in overdraft, and if you don't put it back right now, I'm going to put my hand through this phone wire, and I'm going to wring your neck. But that's not what we do, because, you know, this person has 90% of the power we're talking to on the phone in some foreign country. You know, we say, please help me. But not in Watchdog Nation. In Watchdog Nation, you go, shh. But ladies, don't do this outside, okay? So Watchdog Nation, it has 5 principles, and each one of these principles is their basic. Watchdog Nation probably has 100 principles, but the basic 5 that show you how to do it for free in a few seconds are evergreens that work all the time in everything. And as we go through them today, you know, you're going to say to yourself, I do that. Yeah, I've done that. But then you have to think, wait a minute. Do I do it all the time, or do I do what Dave did and take a shortcut on the insurance guy and calling him to get the roofer? Do I do it all the time or not? And principle number 1 is the most important one, and it's so obvious, but it's so easy to forget. And I have it represented by what I consider to be the greatest invention of my lifetime. Excuse me while I go under the lectern here. I dropped something. It's represented by this box, because what this box looks like to me is what I call the magic Google box. The Google box is incredible, because you can check anything before you do it. And if I had just typed into the magic Google box, Sean Tatum Roofing, Arlington, Texas, and scam, Sean Tatum Roofing, Arlington, Texas, and ripoff, Sean Tatum, Texas, Arlington, and complaints, I would have seen that people are starting to complain about him, and I would have been able to talk to him about it and figured out what to do. But I didn't, because I got recommended by my insurance agent, and I just accepted that. Can you imagine how many people this insurance agent, Tommy, how many he recommended to go to Tatum Roofing? I mean, he lost my business when Tatum went to prison. But these guys don't go to prison. I'm running a campaign right now in Texas to have roofers and building contractors actually get a license like you have here. We don't need a license in Texas. Okay, Oklahoma. Not so okay, Texas. And the reason that we go to the Google box to check things before, like refrigerators and restaurants and things like that, is because we know we can. But every once in a while, we make a big ticket purchase item, like a car or a health insurance policy, and we don't go through those quick steps, complaints, rip-offs, and scams with the name of the product to see what other people have written. And that's when they write to me at the newspaper. And they say stuff like, "Dear Mr. Lieber, I just gave $50,000 to a financial advisor." I apologize, Randy, for this. I gave $50,000 to a financial advisor who absconded with my money and moved to Costa Rica. And when I Googled him, I saw that all these people are complaining about him. I wish I'd read it before I gave him the money, but can you expose him? And I would write back and I'd say, "Why didn't you Google it before?" And they'd say, "Well, because I met him at my church and he seemed like a nice guy." And I'm thinking, gee, you got to Google this stuff before you do it. But then I realized, wait a minute, this is new, because this box didn't even exist like 15 years ago. And so we all in this room grew up without it. And what we grew up with is the instinctive shopping trait that our grandparents had. Our great-great-great-great-grandparents, they held the cantaloupe. They squeezed it. They smelled it. They looked at it. They looked at the price in the store. They thought about how much it cost across the street at the other store. And then they made a gut decision over whether they wanted to buy this melon. And that's how we shopped until 15 years ago. We made gut instinctive decisions. And we were easily swayed at the clothing store with the salesperson, telling us how good we look in those fake mirrors that they have. The fake reviews on Amazon and for Yelp for restaurants that make us think this. So this is not natural for us to do. And fortunately now with the phone, you can now just push a button on your phone and go to the Google search thing and quickly in the store look up the refrigerator. So there my wife Karen and I are standing in there buying a refrigerator a few years ago, and she has her heart set on this LG. And it's got a little dent on the side, which means it's $400 off. She opens up, it's got the French doors, it's just her dream refrigerator. And I say, wait a minute, let me do the little thing, LG 25713 model and Sears outlet store and problems and complaints and ripoff and scam. And of course, you remember 120 complaints came up about that refrigerator. And I said, we're not buying this. And you said, I hate being married to the watchdog. So that's number one. You just have to remember to look up before you hire somebody or buy something. You just got to Google it and you can't forget. A friend of mine at the newspaper said to me, I'm about to hire a dog trainer, but I don't know if the company that he works for is any good. Would you Google him for me? And I sat down at her computer and she stood up, and within about 30 or 40 keystrokes, I pointed to his picture on the sex offender website. And I said, is this the guy you're going to bring in for your dog? And she said, not anymore. But she didn't know to do that. She didn't know to do that. There's a website that I use that I pay $35 a year for. It's called publicdata.com, and I've used it for 20 years. And it has everything on there. It has people's criminal records. It has their driver's license, their license plates, and you're able to go back and check people's licenses and everything. It's the best $35 that I spend. So that's Watchdog Nation principle number one. Check it out. And I know you're all thinking, well, I do that anyway. So let's move on to number two. Number two is to make them accountable to you. So that when you call these people on the phone in foreign countries, let's say, who represent your bank or your car company or whoever it is you're calling a creditor, you remember what I said about how there's 90%, they have 90% of the power and you have 10% of the power on the phone because you're begging them to get your money back or whatever, you're begging them to care. I want to show you real quickly how to take charge of that customer service phone call so that it's 50-50 and you're on equal terms with them. And the way you do that is remember I said that in Watchdog Nation you don't need to spend any money, but you actually do need to go out and buy a tool. So I'll correct myself. And that tool is you need to go out and buy a blank sheet of paper. Because as soon as you go out to the mailbox to pick up that letter that is going to cause you that little bit of grief where you're going to have to call and complain about that bill, I used to have a panic attack. at the mailbox. I would literally open it up, rip open the envelope. There'd be this letter saying I owed all this money to this cable company that I know I didn't. And I would stand there and I would just, and the neighbors would drive by and go, look, there's Dave, he got his electric bill again. And I would literally have a freak out. I would start to hyperventilate because I knew I had to call India. And Karen would say, what's the matter? And I go, the bank just mugged me at the mailbox and I got to call them. And I'd go through that whole rigmarole, what is the name? What is the secret code? How many are on the account? Blah, blah, blah. And then I would just beg the guy for the money. But now I don't do that anymore. Now when they ask me to tell my story, I go, whoa. That's a word I learned in Texas. Whoa, whoa. I want to ask you a couple of questions. And I say, I've got a sheet here of paper and I need to fill it out. And I usually write on the top the name of the company. And with me, it's always the name of the same company. It's always AT&T. And I talk to the person. I say, before I tell you what my problem is, I need to ask you a few questions for my sheet. My sheet. And I click my pen. And they don't care because they talk to people that have a sheet, but they watch what happens. So I ask them the one question that they don't like to be asked by customers, which is what? What is your name? And they don't care about that question because, when I say, what is your name, they would give you the fake name. And I know it's a fake name because I was talking to a guy one night for Linksys wireless router. And he was in India, in Bangalore. And he told me that his name was Elvis. But I can't laugh at him because the whole point of it is to get 50% of the power from a 90-10 guy. So I just go, okay, let me write that down, Elvis. He doesn't care. And then I say, Elvis, let me get your company ID number. He goes, no, you get a reference number at the end. You could trace me that. I go, no. I might be talking to there might be more than one Elvi in your organization. So then, and I know you've all been here, you've all done this. Then they say, okay, he gives the number and he gives it really fast. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. And you say, whoa, I got to write that down. And you say, what's the first number again? And he goes, and that's 10 points right there. You'll hear him go, because he's got to make these calls quick, go away. But now you're going, so you go like 2. Oh, that's the number of children I have. I love that number. 4. See, we're being hacked. 6. And they go, okay, Elvis, 2, 4, 6, 8, 12, 14, 16, 18. Where are you located? And he'll tell you he's wherever he is. And you say, I want to write that down. He's still not worried. And then you say, okay, Elvis, I'm going to tell you what my problem is. But before I do, I want you to know that last month I talked to Sheila, number 2374544. She was in the Venezuela office. She told me she was going to fix this. Do you know her? Okay. Okay, now here's where you get 50-50. You say, okay, Elvis, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20 on October 5th, 2016 at 12:37 p.m. Central Time. I am now going to tell you my problem. But as a customer courtesy, I want you to know, Elvis, that I am taping this call for customer quality control. And you hear him go, that's okay, Mr. Lieber. Or is it Lieber? Because suddenly he cares. Because he thinks you're taping him and he thinks you got a sheet and he knows that you know who he is, and all of a sudden you're the 1 out of 100 customer that day that you're not to be messed with. He can mess with the other 99, but don't mess with you because you don't know what you're going to do. And what I do with AT&T is I take the phone calls and I put them on the internet. That's part of my #ShameATT campaign that I've been running. And this is, and all this stuff works because after I started my #ShameATT campaign, I was actually summoned to the office of the CEO, President, and Chairman of the Board of AT&T, Randall Stevenson, who sat me down in his office and said, you're making fun of me in the newspaper and I don't like it, and I know your boss, the publisher, but the thing is, I really care about customer service, and I wanted to tell you that to your face so you stop writing that I don't. And I pulled out a red loose leaf notebook and I said, these are the complaints that I've gotten about your company in the past 100 days. There's 119 people in here that hate your guts. Here, take it and fix it because I'm tired of getting your complaints all the time. Whew, that felt good. course, you can all tell how well it's worked. ATT is perfect since then, you know. So that was the way I used my power sheet on the CEO, but I gave him a whole red loose leaf, and of course you know why it was red, because that's the screaming emergency color, and that's what's going on in his company right now. So number one was check it out on the Google box, and number two was make a power sheet and hold them accountable and tell them you're taping the call. Even if you're not, tell them you are, because they get all freaky worried about it because no one else does. And you know, the way I tape a call is I put on a little digital voice recorder and I push the record button, and then I have my phone on speaker. So I don't even use wires anymore, you know. And I do it when I think that someone's about to lie to me. Like when I call a credit card company and I get them to lower the credit rate, I tell them I'm taping the call. So if the bill comes next month and the rate is still what it is last month, I know who you are and where to find you. It's like sticking your hand through the wire. Now I know you probably can't do that because you're from OK Ethics and you're nice, but I'm from Manhattan. So I don't mind being a jerk to somebody if they're going to probably cost me money and time and aggravation. But you don't have to be a jerk in Watchdog Nation. Number one is check it out. Number two is hold them accountable with a power sheet. And number three, when the first two don't work, it's find their point of vulnerability. And I describe their point of vulnerability is the one thing about your problem that they don't want you to find out about. They're hoping that you don't find out. And the truth is that every problem that you have in your life now as a consumer, somebody else has already had it before you. There's no such thing as an original problem. And all you have to do to find the point of vulnerability is go back to the Google box and type in your problem. And what you find is 4 points of vulnerability generally. The first one is there may be an attorney general investigation going on in one of the 50 states. Not in Texas because he's under indictment. But the second point of vulnerability you might find is that the state regulator in that home state of Texas or Oklahoma is actually conducting some kind of an investigation in an obscure office in state government that you never heard of, but they've heard of. The third thing you might find is an article by a columnist or a reporter like me, or a TV broadcast on YouTube from a local NBC affiliate that they did a report on this. And I can't remember what the fourth point of vulnerability is, but there is a fourth one. It'll come to me. The point is, you call them on the phone. You ask to speak to the supervisor. You've all asked to speak to the supervisor. In fact, if I asked right now how many of you are supervisors, a whole bunch of your hands would go up. And you tell the supervisor, I'm keeping a record. I've got a sheet. I know I talked to Elvis. I know I talked to Sheila. And I want to tell you, Supervisor Ann Smith, AT&T Escalation Specialist, number 437521 in Atlanta, Georgia, on October 5th, 2016 at 12:42 p.m. I want to tell you that I am taping this call for customer quality control, Supervisor Smith, because if you can't fix my problem in this one phone call, I'm going to the Idaho Attorney General, who I see is investigating this. I'm going to the columnist at the Dallas Morning News, who I see wrote about this a month ago. I'm sure he'd like to know that you're still doing it. Would you like me to send you his column? And she says, would you please hold on? Because you found the point of vulnerability about your problem, the bad refrigerator, the bad account, whatever it is, and you told her you knew about it, and she goes away, and now you've got 80% of the power, she's got 20%. She comes back and she says, Mr. Lieber, we'll fix this right away. We'll overnight you the check back tomorrow. And that's really how it works, because every problem has already happened. There's somebody already on top of it. And if you tell them that you know who it is, they get scared and they bounce you. There's certain key words that you have to say to them, like attorney general or lawyer or lawsuit or class action or, I know the guy at the newspaper or whatever it is. And people do. And it works. It's simple. That's number three. Find their point of vulnerability, the part of their armor that you can pierce just by asking what it is. Number four is my favorite one. And I made a button years ago because I didn't think people in Texas were doing this enough. The button says, ask a bunch of questions. And I just didn't think that the Texans were doing it. Let me just take a sidestep here and tell you that what I'm going to do right now in this fourth item is I'm going to show you the entire story of Watchdog Nation in a story on what's in this box here on the other side. And this is really my specialty in life as a storyteller. And I write my stories in the newspaper, not as newspaper reports, but as stories with beginnings, middles, and ends. And in my second job, I go to companies like yours and I teach them how to tell their story better. And so I'm just going to show you how I would tell the story of Watchdog Nation with one little swoop. In this box, I have the symbol of American wealth, which is Starbucks. Because anybody that can get you to spend, $6 on a cup of dirty water with whipped cream on top has really got something going, right? And how many sizes? Oh, before I get to sizes, let me just say, I'm about to ask a bunch of questions. I thought Texans don't like to ask a lot of questions because they consider it to be rude that you invade someone's space. Now, being from Manhattan, I didn't know there was such a thing as invading someone's space. But they don't like to get in your face. So I thought if I could just get the Texans to ask 2 extra questions before they buy or hire, it would make such a big difference. So I wanted them to be like Detective Columbo, where they go, oh, thank you very much, used car salesman, and kind of walk to the door and then just turn around and go, oh, yeah, just one more question. And just zing them, like with a couple of really tough questions. Because they're not expecting it, and, it doesn't hurt to ask. And with 2 extra questions, you can save yourself a lot of time, money, and aggravation, as I'll show you. How many sizes do they have on the menu at a Starbucks store? 3. Yeah. They actually have 4 now. They have this size, which is called a Trenta. But if you drink it, you'll die. When you go to Starbucks, do you see large, medium, and small on the menu? If you did, you'd know what you were getting. But I believe that American corporations use language to fool us into getting confused so that we don't really know what we're getting. Because what do they call the large at Starbucks? Venti. And what language is Venti? Italian. Why would you name your top product Italian something? I don't get it. And what is the medium called? Grande. And what does grande mean in Spanish? Large. So they've actually they have the nerve. Starbucks is not a sponsor, right, Shannon? This is a little bit nervy, don't you think, to take the meaning of the word large and turn it on your own volition to medium, but that's what they do. But it gets worse, because you say to Starbucks people, hey, you know what, I don't know what any of that fancy word stuff is, barista. Can I just have a small cup of coffee? And she says, we don't have that here. We have barista, I don't want a tall, I want a small. And she said the words that haunt me, the words that define the presidential race this year. She says, tall is small. So here are the 3 sizes that people order every day at Starbucks. But remember what I said, just 2 extra questions and life is so much better. The first question, I'm going to leave my box there because it's holding up my cups. The first question I'm going to ask the Magic Google Box, the first of my Detective Columbo questions is Google Box, what's the secret size cup at Starbucks? And on my Google Box, a word comes up, and if you know it, you get the secret size. And only about 1 out of 100 people know it. Does anybody here know it? No? Who said short? How did you know that? You used to work there. Or do you swear that you are not a plant for this magic trick? Will you come up here so I can saw you in half? What's your name? Shannon. Not that Shannon. So Shannon, who worked at Starbucks, knows that hidden under the counter in every standalone store, 25 cents cheaper, that is not on the menu, is the short. This is the short compared to the tall. And look at the difference in size. And Shannon, it's like a 1/4 cent cheaper, right? Quarter. And it's not bad, but it's enough to get you climbing off the ceiling like a chimichanga. I don't know what a chimichanga is. So Shannon has this advantage over all of you that she goes in and she spends $1.60 instead of $5, and she gets a short and she nurses it and she sits there and does her laptop work for 6 hours. When you go in, there's no seat because everybody else is doing the same thing. But you can actually drink for free at Starbucks too, and you don't even have to buy the short. So Google Box, second final question from Detective Columbo of coffee. How do I drink coffee for free at Starbucks? ? Enter. Does anybody know the word? before Shannon probably blurts it out. The free coffee word at Starbucks? Do you know what it is, Shannon? Do you remember the word? Drip is, I never tried that one. How about this one, Shannon? A barista, I don't really know what I want. Could I please have a sample of the coffee? Does that work for you? You take this cup and you go to the barista, you just go to Shannon and you say, Shannon, thank you so much. And you go, and you make this really awful face like that. And then you go over to the corner and you hide and you go, and then you go back up to Shannon and you say, can I have another coffee of the something, something, something? And you get 2 free cups of coffee and you're flying off the walls like a chimichanga, right? And you can get everything for free in this cup in Starbucks except for the Frappuccino. Do you know why they won't give you a Frappuccino in here? Do you want to tell them? You don't remember? Because they have another cup for that. You see this? See, this really bothers me because what I see happening is I see the public going in and getting this, where just literally a few feet away is this hiding, waiting. Find me, only Shannon knows about me. And, you know, it's not really about coffee, right? It's about on the airplane. These are like Russian dolls. They all fit back in the box, see? On the airplane, this gentleman here paid $400 for the ticket. This gentleman here paid $300. This lady paid $200. You flew for free and you're hiding in the bathroom. You know? Do you guys shop competitively for electricity in this state, like different companies, or do you have to go with a monopoly? In Texas, we have 55 companies, of which 50 of them are like not okay ethics. And you know, you paid 6 cents a kilowatt hour, you're paying 9 cents, you're paying 12 cents, you're paying 15, you're paying 25 cents a kilowatt hour for the same power because they don't really know how to use the box. And so that's number 4, ask a bunch of questions, and that's how I tell my whole story in one little story, which is what I like to do. But since I have a couple of extra minutes, I'm going to go to the final principle of Watchdog Nation, number 5, and just say right now that it'll scare some of you because it's the nuclear option. It's the one you never want to pull out because it's deadly and it bruises people badly, but it almost always works. So you've done the other 4 things. You've checked it out on the internet. You've kept a power sheet to make them accountable. You've found their point of vulnerability. You've asked a lot of questions, but they're still hurting you. So you do number 5, which is find their pressure point and squeeze. Like that. And I know that because somebody one time did it to me. I was a reporter in Philadelphia, and this county commissioner didn't like what I wrote about him. So during the recess of the public meeting, he came up to me and he put his hand on my neck, and he just started to squeeze my neck. And I said, well, the first thought I had was, wow, this guy really knows where my pressure point is. He's a former Marine. This really hurts. Ow. That's a split second right there. And then the second split second, I go, I'm going to turn around. I'm going to grab him by the neck. And I'm going to say, you don't touch a member of the press. But instead what happened was I just went like this. Oh! And he was like holding over me. And then I remember I got up. He let go and I got up. And I was in shock. I didn't know what to say or do. And I walked out of the room. It's never happened before or since. And a week later, my neck was still sore from it. So here I am 25 years later, and I'm trying to figure out how do I do this to AT&T? Find their pressure point and squeeze. And number 5 is the one that everybody seems to get stuck on. They forget to do it. But number 5 is the fact that everybody that we deal with in this country answers to somebody else. Today I answer to Shannon. But at home I answer to my publisher. Everybody that we hire or buy, they get permitted, they get audited, they get registered, they get certified, they get authorized. They got a check on them somewhere, but the public doesn't know the check. So how do you find out who is over that person? You go back to the box. And you just ask the question. So in my particular case with the refrigerator, I paid a home warranty company. How many of you have home warranty companies? I paid a home warranty company, monthly fee, and they're supposed to fix the refrigerator. And they come over to the house and they go, no, we don't fix that one part. And I go, well, it doesn't say that. And so every day, you call and complain, and you ask for Elvis, and you talk to Sheila, and you get nowhere. So number 5, you go to the internet and you say, who regulates home warranty companies in Texas? And it turns out nobody knew this. The Texas Real Estate Commission does. And you click on their website and it says, we regulate home warranty companies. If you have a problem with one, let us know. We'll investigate. We audit their books every 2 years and reissue them their license. You click on it. You say, here's what they did to me. They won't fix the part even though I pay them every month. And you hit send and the complaint just kind of flies through the air with the gold seal of government on it. And it lands on the home warranty guy's desk and he goes, because you found his pressure point and you squeezed it. And he'll call you on the phone. He'll say, Mr. Lieber, this is Hank from Home Warranty, and there's been a mistake. Oh, I'm so sorry. We made a mistake about your part. Elvis is coming over tomorrow. He's going to fix it for free as a courtesy, a one-time, that's when they go, one-time customer courtesy. You've all heard that expression. And then he says, when he's over there, he's going to have a letter and he's going to want you to sign it. And you say, what does the letter say? And he'll say, the letter says you're dropping the complaint with the Real Estate Commission because our license is coming up for renewal and they're auditing the books. And do you know what you say? You say, would you please hold on? And now you have all been trained officially as citizens of Watchdog Nation. And to celebrate that, I have, for everyone in the room, I brought an ID card. And the reason I did this ID card is because it's sort of like your freedom of the press blackmail tool. I want you to forget about this card. Stick it in your purse or your wallet. And then 2 years from now, you're going to go to the garage to pick up your car. And the guy's going to say, I'm sorry, Randy, but I told you it was $500, and it's really $900 because we had to fix something else. And you say, you didn't tell me, I didn't authorize it. And he goes, well, if you want your car, you got to pay it, or else I'm going to start charging you $40 a day. This is this article that I just happened to write last week. It's fresh in my mind. And you pull out your card and you go, do you know who I am? Excuse me. Do you know who I am? I'm friends with the Watchdog. Leave out Dallas. I'm friends with the Watchdog, and he has a website, Watchdog Nation, and he told me that if he ever met anybody like you, to let him know about it because he would want to put it on the internet forever. Do you want to mess with me? And on the back is my contact information, and you go, do you want to mess with me? And you just got to twirl it like this. And sometimes people can't twirl it because they have arthritis, so you can do it with 2 hands. I came up with this card because an elderly woman in Fort Worth called me once and said, you don't know me, I don't know you, but I lied and said I knew you at the car place. And I told the guy I was going to give you the story, and he gave me my car back for $500. So I just want to thank you and hope you're not mad at me. I said, mad at you? I'm going to print 1,000 cards. So I've got one of these for everybody, and they'll be on the table before you go back to work. Just grab one. And don't be afraid to use it. And if you ever have a problem with AT&T, because the truth is, how many of you are AT&T customers? Okay, this I'm serious. I'm serious about this. Okay, on the back of my card is my email address. Okay, it's dave@yankeecowboy.com. That's my email address, and it's on this card. If you ever have a problem with AT&T where 1 or 2 calls doesn't cut it, you write me an email and you say, Dear Mr. Lieber, I have a problem with AT&T. Please write a story about me in your newspaper. Here's my problem. Here's what I want. Here's my name, my address, and my account number, and my phone number. And then you send it to me. And I promise you, within 1 week, that email will be sitting on Randall Stevenson, the CEO's desk, because I send him all my emails, because I asked him, do you want me to send my complaints in the future to you or to the FCC? He said, send them to him. Find their pressure point and squeeze. Randall Stevenson, by the way, is right now finishing up his work on the robocall strike force, where he was made chairman of by the chairman of the Federal Communications Commission after the Federal Communications Commission read my story on Randall, in which Randall said that he didn't have the power to stop robocalls at AT&T. The FCC chairman said, not only do you have the power to stop them, I'm making you chairman of the committee to stop them. The report's due next week. It's all my fault, and I can't wait to see what happens. So remember that. And if you ever have a problem with a national company that you can't solve on your own, send me an email, and I can try and forward it to them. Don't forget to put on the top, please write a story about me in the newspaper, because that's the words that they understand. Okay? So everything I told you today was free and takes just a few seconds, but if you want to dig down a little deeper, I took all this information and I wrote another book called Watchdog Nation, where I teach everybody how to do this in just about every field and every industry, except for yours. No, I'm not bashing any natural gas companies. I'm not bashing public strategies. You guys are the real storytellers over there, right? You know storytelling. So I brought some of these with me, and I'm really proud of this book. It works all over the country, and it just has an index in the back, and it shows you what to do with the washing machine or the dry cleaners or whatever it is, and it's got all these ideas that are free and take just a few seconds. And I've got a credit card machine over there. Yes. So I'd be happy to make a good Christmas present. I'll sign it for your relatives. And sometimes people say, well, Dave, I don't have time to read because I'm so busy. So I said, that's okay. I made a double CD audio book. And I brought this book with me, too. This is only $10. It's a paperback, and it's a collection of stories about life and funny stuff that makes you laugh and cry, and starts off with that marriage proposal called The Dog of My Nightmares. And there's an audio book. So I've got all that. So I hope you'll pick up a copy or two and let me sign it for you because they're fun. So I guess all that's left is I have to swear you in now as citizens of Watchdog Nation. I'm going to give you an oath of office. It's very short. There's no penalty of perjury or forgery or any other kind of urgery. And once you take it, you guys are super consumers and no one will ever mess with you again. So let me just get my logo out here and I'll just ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me. I do solemnly swear that as a new citizen of Watchdog Nation, I will preserve, protect, and defend the rights of myself, my family, and my friends against what President Bush called the evildoers. Congratulations, you're all citizens of Watchdog Nation. Okay, ethics!